All right, my name is Patrick Benner, and we're going to begin our video overview of the Cisco IT Essentials version 6 course. I've taught the CompTIA A Plus material for all of last year, and I've got 2 sections scheduled this fall, so I'm very familiar with the content. The layout's a little different, and the organization and some of the things that Cisco focuses on versus CompTIA, uh, but it's very similar in nature. So the first thing that I want to talk about before we start looking at the system is what happens when we turn our system on. Well, as soon as we hit the power button, the power supply is going to send electrical current to the motherboard as well as our peripherals. And one of the first things that's going to happen is the BIOS is going to start, which the BIOS contains our basic system information. The newer version of BIOS is UEFI, and I'll discuss the major differences between those two here in just a moment. BIOS is going to look at our system configuration. It's going to look at the boot order, set the date and time, and it might also do some other things. We can go into the BIOS, we can alter the boot order, we can change the date and time, we can update BIOS, we can enable or disable devices. But BIOS is primarily going to run what's called POST, or the power on self test. POST is going to check for major system components before it turns the boot loading operation over to the rest of the system. It's going to check and make sure that we've got a CPU, that we've got a hard drive, we've got RAM, and we've got a keyboard or some sort of input device. If the BIOS detects an error in any of that, it's going to issue some series of beep codes if our video driver has not started yet. If our video driver has started, we might get some error message on the screen, but normally it's conveyed to the user in the way of beep codes. The way we're going to troubleshoot that would be to go to the motherboard manufacturer website, and we could Google the beep codes and find out exactly what the issue is with that. Let's go ahead and go in here and take a look at our system. First, we need to see what our system has in it. So we can go up to System, and that's going to tell us lots of good stuff. We've got the operating system version that we're running, which this system is running Windows 10 Pro. It's a 64-bit version that we're running. We've got 8 gig of RAM installed. We're running an AMD A6 processor running at 1.8 gigahertz, which the reason why that's slow, this is about a 3-year-old laptop that I'm using. It also has a touch screen, so it's got touch support. It's got a computer name, and then this is a member of a work group called Workgroup. Our Windows operating system, Windows 10 product key is down at the bottom, and that's the high level overview of our system. Now, if we want to delve a little deeper, we can go down and go to Run, and we can look at MS Info 32. And that's going to give us basically all the same information with a lot more added to it. Let's scroll down here a little bit. This is a Dell Inspiron 64-bit system. Our BIOS mode, this system runs UEFI. So what I talked about earlier, one of the big differences between BIOS and UEFI is the size of the hard drives that it will support, because BIOS will only support up to a 2 terabyte drive, but UEFI is pretty much unlimited, as well as a number of partitions. BIOS supports 4, and UEFI supports up to 127. Scroll down here a little further. Again, we've got a overview of our RAM. Virtual RAM. Down here we've got some entries for Hyper-V, so that means the system will support Hyper-V. I used to run freeware of Hyper-V on here back when I was taking a undergrad course, and I had to run about three different instances rather, of the Server 2008 R2 operating system, and so I ran all that on this one laptop using a Hyper-V. So let's go ahead and close that window out. And the other thing we're going to go in and look at is the MS config. Normally when we use MS config, what we're wanting to do is alter the boot startup. As you can see here, normal startup is what's selected on the system. If we needed to go and do some diagnostic work, we could click on diagnostic startup, where the system's going to start up more in a like bare bones type situation. It's going to load our basic drivers and services. Or we could go down here to selective startup, and we've got some options that are there. We've also got, under services, we can change which services start at startup here, and that's the major stuff that's we're going to be concerned with there in MS config. Now, when we want to talk about preventative maintenance with a PC, one thing, obviously, we look for backing up our data. So we've got three different options there. We've got full backups, incremental, and differential. Some basic Windows utilities that we have are disk cleanup, defrag, Windows Firewall, and Windows Defender. So those are some of the other major preventative maintenance items that we have. Let's go into Control Panel, and let's go down here and look at Windows Firewall. And Windows Firewall is turned on. So what we can do is, we've got it selected to block all connections to applications that are not on the list of allowed applications. We can change these settings. We have different options in here. We have public networks, guest networks, home networks, private networks. If we were in a coffee shop, for instance, that would be considered a public network, and we would definitely want to have Windows Firewall turned on there. Another thing is Windows Defender. So let's go in and take a peek there. Windows Defender. Periodic scanning is on, but it says my real-time protection is handled by another AV program. That's because I run AVG, which we can take a look at out here on the desktop. Here's my AVG shortcut icon on the desktop. This is a freeware version. They've got, of course, just like with anybody out there anymore, they've got a pay version, but I use this in conjunction with Malwarebytes, which is up here, and Windows Defender, and that seems to do a pretty good job for me. As far as running defrag, now this system happens to have a solid state drive in it, so it will come from pressing the start button to being user ready in under 8 seconds. But we do not want to run defrag on a solid state drive. That's only for the traditional IDE drives, where we've got spinning platters. Another major area that we're going to look at here is under networking components. As far as the hardware goes, we've got Ethernet. The basic choices are Ethernet, wireless, or fiber. either at home. Usually at home we're going to see wireless. At the office we're normally going to see Ethernet, maybe some wireless, depending on the application and the system that you happen to be on. You may or may not see some fiber. Usually that's more in the backbone situation. In Ethernet, to support gigabit Ethernet, which is seems to be the bottom end standard these days, we need either a Cat 5e or a Cat 6. Those two will support gigabit Ethernet. We also have our network interface card, or our NIC. And NICs operate at, let me get back into networking. NICs operate at both the hardware, which is considered level 1, or layer 1, I'm sorry, and the also at the layer 2, because of the MAC address, which is burned into the NIC at the factory when the card is manufactured. So here is a look at, I'm on a private network, my internet's ready to use, and I am connected on Wi-Fi to a router that the SSID is Netgear 76. I can go in here and look at my adapter settings. Like I said, I'm on Wi-Fi and I have my Ethernet cable unplugged, so that's got a red X through it, and it says it's unplugged. So if I want to look at my Wi-Fi configuration, I can go down there, go to Properties, and I can double click on IPv4, and I'm set up to obtain an IP address automatically, as well as my DNS server information. This is normally the case on just about any network, unless this is a device such as a server or a printer or a router or a switch, where you always need to be able to find that device on the network. In that case, those types of devices are going to be issued a static IP. But as I said, normal user PCs are usually going to be set up to obtain their address dynamically from a DHCP server. So let's close out of that. If I want to find out what my IP address is, or my MAC address, I can go down here. Let's open up a command window. Go to a command line interface, and I can type ipconfig. And I get some good stuff here. I've got my link local IPv6 address, my IPv4 address, my subnet mask, and my default gateway. These are the three pieces of information that any PC needs in order to be able to communicate with the outside world: is an IP address, a subnet mask, and the gateway. The gateway is our border router, and that tells the PC how it's going to get out to the nether world. Another thing we can do here, if I hit F, oops, I go ipconfig /all. Oops, my A didn't hit there. Now I get lots and lots and lots of stuff. So I can go up here and get back to where I was. Okay, and here's my Ethernet adapter. Excuse me. And here's my MAC address. It's a 48-bit hex address that is unique to this card. And then under my wireless LAN adapter, there is a different MAC address, because every MAC address has to be unique globally. The first three are going to tell you the manufacturer, and then the last three are stamped on there by the manufacturer to identify this individual card. We talked a little bit about static and dynamic IP addressing. Subnets. We've got classful and classless subnets, or networking rather. everything has moved to a classless uh, situation anymore, and we use what's called CIDR, or CIDR, which stands for Classless Interdomain Router. And what CIDR allows us to do is subnets, and we can do that almost as much as we need to. Uh, so a typical, let me open up Notepad. A typical subnet might be 255.255.255.0. That's a Class C subnet. But if we wanted to break this down and subnet that, we could go 255.255.255.248. And this is going to give us more subnets, or I'm sorry, let me, I got that backwards, so let's go 248 here. There we go. That's going to give us more subnets with, I'm sorry, that's going to give us less subnets with more hosts. The logic on that in my brain gets a little bit mixed up sometimes. So now on the IP addressing, let's get back to that for just a sec. Go back to command prompt. A couple of things we can do. We know if our IP address is 192.168 dot something. If we want to test connectivity, we know our gateway is 192.168.1.1. I could ping that to make sure that my ICMP packets are, there we go, making their way around. So I've got connectivity with my border router. And we could also do 8.8.8.8 as a popular DNS server. I believe that one's run by Google. So we've also got connectivity outside of our local network. If we wanted to look at traceroutes, another tool that we can use. If we want to look at if we're having trouble reaching a particular destination, normally if it's outside of our network, there's nothing we can do about it. But if we're in a larger organization and we've got multiple routers that we might be going through to get to our destination, traceroute can be a handy tool to see where we're running into problems at. Another thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about layer 1, layer 2, we also got the transport layer, which takes care of TCP and UDP. TCP is a connection-oriented protocol, and UDP is connectionless. So that means it does a best effort to connect, and that's a good protocol for voice and video, as well as some local network protocols like DHCP, to where if the information, it's making a best attempt at it. We've also got domains and work groups. As we saw a little earlier, this PC is a member of a work group called work group. If we're in a larger organization like Ivy Tech, we're going to be logging into a domain. A domain is the great thing about a domain is the centralized management from the administrator's point of view. You can manage all the PCs from a central location, as well as apply group policies to hardware and to users, so that you can add an extra layer or layers of security in there. So for instance, when a student logs in, they don't see the information in the HR department. File sharing. I've got, if the link is still up, it doesn't look like it is. I'm at home and I had my son's computer on here. We're both going through the same router. He's connected hardwired and I am wireless. But his computer went to sleep and he isn't here to log back in. Otherwise, we'd have another icon over here that would have his PC's name on it. I did create a folder with a document in there, and I went to the property sharing and shared that out so we could see it from here. As far as ISP connectivity, the three major choices there, we've got broadband, which is cable. We've got DSL and ADSL, which is based on phone lines. And we've got satellite. One of the biggest satellite providers is HughesNet, that's who I happen to have because I live out in the country in the middle of nowhere. And of course, all the DSL and broadband stuff stops a mile from my house. As far as the difference between laptops and desktops, laptops have obviously less expansion slots. And the other big difference is that they use SODIMMs instead of DIMMs, like a regular desktop or tower PC. SODIMMs can have the same memory storage capacity. It's just the chips are smaller to be able to fit into the laptop case. They've also got a number of USB slots, so we could add some external devices like a mouse, external keyboard, external hard drive, that sort of thing. If we're talking about smartphones, like either an iPhone or an Android, we need to set up networking, and usually more email than anything is the important thing there that needs to be configured from the user standpoint. There are two ways to do that. It's either SMTP or IMAP, and that's basically usually depends on your mail provider as to which or both of those that they support. Some other things that we look at in this course is VPN, or virtual private network. That's basically where we set up a secure tunnel between, I could set up a VPN connection between this laptop and my computer at the office. If we had a VPN router that would be able to set up or accept a VPN connection. Printers is the other major category in this course, and we can look really quickly here on installing a printer. And I know we are pretty much out of time here, so I will go through this really quickly. Whoops. Wrong icon. I want devices and printers. So let's say I want to install a printer on this network, which is a 192.168.1. So I could go in here to devices and printers, click on add a printer, and then the Windows printer wizard is going to start. Excuse me. I'm just going to speed ahead and say it wasn't found. And I'm going to add a printer using a TCP IP address. So I'll click there, say next. And I will have already configured this IP address into my printing device. But let's say that that's what it is. That doesn't really exist, but from my PC standpoint, it doesn't really care at this point. We're just creating a port on this laptop. Although with Windows 10, now that I think about it, I know Windows 7, you didn't have a problem installing this without there actually being a device present. But at this point, it would go out and, here we go. It's going to go out and look on the network and try to find that device, and then it will, Windows 10 will want to auto load a bunch of stuff because it thinks it's smarter than people. but normally the printer manufacturer will have a print driver specific to this printer so that we can take advantage of all of the functionality of that printing device. And so that's what we're going to want to install rather than letting Windows do it automatically. And let me just cancel out of here, and we'll go in and look at, let's see, if we go to printers, we go to advanced. This is grayed out here, but here is where our driver is listed, and we could click on new driver, and then we can go out and find the driver after we downloaded and extracted the file, change it here, apply it, and OK it. Here's our port. Right now it's on a local printer port, but if we had a TCP IP port created, which is a process I just canceled out of, that would also be listed on here, and we would just click there and attach it there. So that is my I apologize, over 20-minute video on the IT Essentials course. Thanks for watching.